There you go to discuss this and other political headlines of the day. James Campbell, political editor for the Herald Sun, and Peter Gleeson, host of The Front Page on Sky News. Gentlemen, great to have you on the show. I'll start with you, Gleeson. Much ado about nothing. Do you think there's a big issue here that we should be looking at? For my mind, I have to say Alexander Downer, a former foreign minister, hearing something when he's in the job as our commissioner in London, passing it on, I think is quite appropriate. Should we be concerned?
No, not at all. And you actually just took the words right out of my mouth. Much ado about nothing. Who would have thought that Australia, with its such strong historical and traditional links with the United States, would actually help the United States in an ongoing domestic investigation that's going on there that obviously relates very specifically to what Donald Trump's been up to and what Russia obviously have been up to. I think this is once again an example, and I know you mentioned this in your opener, you know, the Canberra bubble, the Washington bubble, they're all, you know, sort of in a lather about this particular development. But at the end of the day, and I'm sure Scott Morrison will come out in the next 24 hours and put this very, very quickly to bed. And it's along the lines of Australia are providing as much information, as much detail as required by the United States on that conversation between Downer and Papadopoulos. And I mean, at the end of the day, we've been very transparent right from the start, and we'll be continuing to be transparent into the future.
What do you make of it all?
Well, from the get-go, I've thought it was very strange that we chose to pass this on during the American election. Alexander Downer did the right thing, having picked up this gossip in a bar. He passes it back to Canberra. Somebody then, for whatever reason, we still don't understand this, decided that it was a good idea in that fraught environment to tell the FBI. Now, what we've learned really in the last couple of years is there's no such thing in the United States now as a non-political investigation. Everything is political there.
Very much.
The very decision to insert ourselves as this, as back then under the Turnbull government, has now essentially embroiled us in what is a witch hunt by the President of the United States against elements of his own government.
So people at home can follow the code there that you're giving me, James. It's important to note that once the information came back from Alexander Downer to the Foreign Affairs Department, it would have been then privy of political officers here in Australia.
Correct.
The then Prime Minister's office, Malcolm Turnbull, the then Foreign Minister, Julie Bishop's office. I don't for a minute think that DFAT, underlings down in the department, would take it upon themselves to relay that information over to the FBI without certain conversations being held.
Correct.
Either FOIable or not, between DFAT, the Prime Minister's office, DFAT, Julie Bishop's office, and obviously Alexander Downer.
Yes.
So there was obviously a political decision taken, you're right to point this out, at the time to buy us into an FBI stouch. Now, were we, Australia, under the Turnbull regime, trying to ingratiate ourselves to the Clinton camp, or what was the story?
Well, the first thing to understand is this is essentially bar gossip, right? Whether we pass... Did anyone in Australia at that point realise that simply passing on bar gossip was going to lead to an FBI probe? Because it's not in dispute that this information from Downer was the trigger that the FBI opened this probe during the Obama administration. Now, there was an interesting thing in Downer's interview today. Previously, it has been reported in the United States, but unconfirmed, that Downer himself directly passed the information on to the Americans. Prior to that, we thought that it came from a letter from Joe Hockey to the FBI. What I really want to know, and I'm not saying anybody's done anything wrong here, is what was the process that led to that? It has been suggested to me...
You mean getting from where Downer picks up the information
Downer picks up this information
and passed across to the United States?
Correct.
Well, that'd be my question too. We're on the
It has been put to me that one of the reasons was that there was a fear that this information was going to appear in a WikiLeaks document dump, right? So they thought, oh my God, this is going to come out. This will look very bad if WikiLeaks reveals that we know this and we haven't told the Americans. So maybe that was the point at which they decided to do it. Either way, it's pretty weird. And I mean, I don't think there's... I'm very comfortable with the way that the Prime Minister's handled this, but let's step back a step. It's a pretty dysfunctional situation for the President of the United States be ringing the Prime Minister of Australia, essentially saying, I want you to help the cops.
Yeah, look, I'm sure the call was about many other things. That is the nature of those calls where they get booked. There's one or two reasons, and a raft of things usually come up in the calls I've certainly sat in on. But I do think it's interesting. Labor today, Bill Shorten and Anthony Albanese, we saw in that package, were very interested in Scott Morrison's handling it. But I think you've got to the nub of the issue tonight. Actually go back 12 or so, 18 months ago, 2 years indeed, to the handling of the former Liberal government. That's probably a little bit more of interest to a journalist than the current state of play.